and congratulate you for the alignment of your do now to the objective and the exit ticket that we talked about in your last lesson planning meeting, because it was there. It's being implemented and it's being implemented correctly, and so that's really exciting to see just the growth there. I also want to congratulate you on your classroom management. So as a first year teacher, I think that classroom management in itself can just be daunting. And I know that earlier you had said that you were, kind of discouraged with just the ratings about your mid-year, but in all honesty, truly classroom management is half of the battle, and that's usually what first year teachers struggle with. So the fact that we are where we are now, like, that's really exciting, and I hope that you're excited about it, because I get super excited to watch you implement these things. Like, it inspires me. It's like, man, like, she's so excited to do this, and in turn the kids are excited, and like everybody's learning, and for me that's cool.
Yeah, the kids.
Now that we've experienced the do now being aligned with the objective on our exit ticket, I'm gonna ask you, what impact have you had in your classroom, or have you seen in your classroom since those three sections have been aligned?
There's a lot of less misunderstanding. Well, it's misunderstanding, but me having to write it out like this, it keeps me on track. I wasn't doing it like this. I was doing it a different way. And if I can stay on track, then they can follow me. And instead of, I start with this, and I jump to this, and I jump to this, and I come back to this, they seem to be able to follow easier. It's because they got trained that way, but it's made my life easier. I'm still learning how to do this alignment, but at least I have a path I can follow.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's been better.
Good.
A lot better.
Good. That's exciting. So now that we've aligned all of these things, our next step is really to focus on aligning learning experiences that are completely aligned with the objective and the exit ticket.
Okay.
So if you can think back to our last planning meeting when we were in there with Hedlund and we were discussing the keys to ensuring that do now's objectives and exit tickets were aligned, do you remember what it is I stated? How we can make sure that all three of those things are aligned?
Was it by the data that you collect? No?
Not necessarily.
How do you tell if this is aligned? I'm trying to think what you said.
I was up on the board and I was like writing out a do now, and I wrote out the objective, and then I wrote out an exit ticket, and I underlined specific words.
Yeah, forgive me. I don't
No, you're
remember.
good. So I was underlining the Bloom's taxonomy verbs inside of each of the do
That's
nows,
right.
the objectives, and the exit tickets.
Yeah, I remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if this is how we ensure those three things are aligned, then what do you think it is we need to do to ensure learning experiences are aligned?
Okay. You lost me a little bit.
Okay, that's okay. So we're setting up an objective, a specific objective, so that kids, as they learn through the day, can answer an exit ticket that is also aligned.
Right.
So we want to make sure that our learning experiences are also aligned.
Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
what is it do you think that we would need to do to make sure that now all four of these things are aligned together?
I'm not sure what you're looking for. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's okay. It can be a really broad question, but the answer is really kind of simplistic. So we want to give them learning experiences that have to do with them producing something tangible by using those verbs, right? So if your objective says analyze, then what does the learning experience need to be?
Well, analysis.
Yeah, kids need to be analyzing.
Okay, that makes complete sense.
So what I have for us is I have an exemplar of this being done, and so I think it's in your stack over here. So this is just a real kind of quick lesson plan exemplar that I put together.
Okay.
It's in the style, it's in the content, it's in my style, but it's in the content of art.
Okay.
But the really cool thing about instruction is that no matter the content, you can tell if it's aligned or not, just if you're looking for the Bloom's taxonomy verbs inside of these particular parts of the lesson plan.
Okay.
So what I want us to do, it's not a fully filled out lesson plan because we don't need that in order to tell alignment between these specific areas.
Okay.
So I want you to look at the lesson objective and then the lesson assessment, and then I also want you to look at the part of the lesson plan that we call learning experiences, which is traditionally the guided practice and the independent practice.
Okay.
And I want to see if you can tell where the alignment takes place.
Okay.
So we're gonna take like a minute to like look over this, just kind of silently peruse and see if we can pick up on where the alignment falls. I don't know, Wardy, are you gonna tell me, where do you think the alignment lies? What were the couple keywords that I used throughout this entire thing?
Well, you use repetition and rhythm.
Right, that's part of the content.
Okay, but then you identify, analysis, responses, read, identify, analyze, take notes, write, analyze. I mean, use the word analyze a lot.
Good.
Rhythm you used a bunch too. Then I was picking up on the responses, because you keep putting that out there, that they'll respond this way, they'll respond that way. So, I didn't look at this big aggressive monitoring, obviously.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I got.
Okay, so you hit the mark with the word analyze, right? So on this sheet of paper, can you find analysis or analyze? Good. And the other word that I used inside of this particular lesson plan was identify or identity. And so identify it's lower than analysis.
Okay.
Where I saw it earlier today.
It's right
when I was
here.
doing this. There you go. And so you can underline identify. So these are the two Bloom's taxonomy terms that like we are really using
Okay.
in this lesson plan, right? So if the objective says that they need to identify and be able to analyze, and then the exit ticket says scholars will be analyzing the three parts of the principles of art, which is, rhythm, repetition, and pattern, then they can look at an artwork and identify those three principles, and then they're going to write an analysis of how the artist used pattern, rhythm, and repetition inside of that artwork.
Okay.
And so what we're essentially doing is we're giving scholars an experience that is aligned with the Bloom's taxonomy words to ensure that they can answer the exit ticket before they walk out of class.
Okay.
In order to continue on with this action step, I asked you to bring this lesson plan that you're working on now, because we are going to ensure that your objective and your exit ticket are completely aligned with your learning experience.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a few minutes, first of all, to make sure that your exit ticket and your objective are where you want them to be, and that we can identify a Bloom's term somewhere within both of them. Hopefully the same Bloom's term, because we want the kids to stay aligned with what they're doing.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a few minutes to look over that.
Good.
Okay, so what do we have? What are your Bloom's terms?
Okay. Okay. So compare and contrast is another way to analyze, correct?
Correct, and I think you'll see in here, you'll see contrast.
Okay.
So compare and contrast, so you know you're sitting in the analysis section of Bloom's.
Right.
So we can underline compare and contrast, which is great. Now let's flip to your exit ticket or your assessment for the day, and
Okay. Relate how radio helped the economy in the 1920s and today. Again, it's a compare and contrast.
it's a compare and contrast. So compare and contrast radio in the 1920s with the radio today.
And this is the economy
Okay,
in the 1920s and the economy today.
okay,
So, I mean, that fits with, my whole lesson was about identify how radio influences the economy.
correct.
So, that worked out fine, and then, this was the introduction to the new materials when I talked to them about it. Now, one of the things they have to do in this lesson.
Back to the objective, and it's identify how radio influences the economy. So So we have compare and contrast here.
Okay, so it should have been compare and contrast the radio's effects on the economy in the 1920s and the radio today?
It could be, identify how radio influences the economy, and then compare and contrast radio in the 1920s with the radio today. I think that's an okay do now.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go ahead and leave the do now there because I can see how, depending on how you write the learning experience, how it's gonna spiral forward. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So identify how radio influences the economy, relate how the radio helped the economy in the 1920s and today. So what do we think might need to be edited there in order to keep a really strong alignment?
I'm not sure because this follows this, which follows that. I don't know how to change that.
Okay. So if you go back to the exemplar, what were the two words that flowed through the entire thing?
Okay, I got it. So it's the analyze and identify, right?
For me it was, but for you, what is it gonna be?
Well, identify.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's identify how the radio helped the community, the economy.
Right. I think now we see the alignment here, right? So
Yeah.
now let's work on this. I see the alignment because in your I&M you're going to talk to the kids about the economy related to radio
Right.
and how commercials used to sell products on the radio. Ovaltine, Little Annie, Orphan Annie, and the Ovaltine.
Exactly.
So when we pull away from the I&M, you're giving them information. A lot of it's kind of factual for the most part
Right.
at this point.
Mhm.
So now we want to create, and I want to focus on, right now, I just want to focus on an independent practice. I don't want to focus on the guided practice yet.
Okay.
So independent practice is meant for, it is a time when scholars are doing this by themselves.
Right.
It is the precursor to the exit ticket,
Mhm.
and in the IP you are still monitoring and walking around the room to make sure that kids will be successful on the exit ticket through the learning experience in the IP.
Okay.
So what we're looking for is that continued alignment in the learning experience.
Okay.
So we probably need to make sure kids are doing what?
Well, we had to follow along. Is that what you're talking about, or is it the identify, analyze? Okay.
They're gonna have to, you're going to have to plan something which allows them to be able to tangibly identify ways that the economy was influenced by the radio
Okay.
in the 1920s and today.
Okay.
So in this independent practice, how is it that you're going to put the responsibility on them to identify how the radio has influenced the economy?
How do I put it back on them? Well, I mean, just to identify that's back on them, just that one statement, or that one word.
Mm-hmm.
That would be independent practice for me to ask that question.
It would be, I wouldn't ask the question. Well, you're going to ask the question, yes, but it would be more of like playing the clips of the movie and then saying, okay, how is this influencing the economy?
I got it. Okay. Individual word times always kind of stump me a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, so but that makes good sense. Because
So what I want to do is real quick flip back into this.
forget my
We
notes.
always go on
That's jogging.
tangents. It's just because I really like talking to you.
Thank you.
So we fixed that. I say identify two ways. That's really good. And here we are in the IP. Right, and have them write down. Oh, okay. Yeah, and so what are scholar actions going to be then when you have them? If you're going to play this excerpt of like Orphan Annie and then say how do you? Scholar actions are going to be what? Are they?
This is just something I would think of, trying to be creative here, is if I playing this and we go through it, you know, then have them create their own short little commercial ad.
Yeah,
to
you
sell.
could.
Yeah, so they're actually doing something on their own. It's kind of fun,
Mhm.
and it follows along with the economy and how it all works, plays together.
So that is so the proof in the IP is going to be the written commercial, right? So
Yes.
they're gonna have to show you the written commercial to
Correct.
ensure.
Correct.
Cool.
And quite honestly, they can show it to me. I may just have them, do it, read it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it is theater class.
Yeah, I mean, the kids are getting so comfortable with each other. They probably wouldn't even have any problems with this now.
You're right. So how are you feeling now about making sure learning experiences are aligned? Better.
Better, yeah.
Understand?
Yes. For the first time, yes.
All right. So just to reframe on the action steps that are needed to make sure it's all in alignment. So ensure that there is alignment between the exit ticket and the objective.
Right.
And how do we make sure that that's aligned? What are we using?
You talking about the verbiage that
Mhm.
we're using?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're trying to used to use the same verbiage all the way through.
Yes. And then how do we ensure that the learning experience is aligned?
By having them do work or produce work that is stated in the objective.
Pretty much, right? So having them tangibly and actively work with whatever that word is. Identify, then they need to identify. Analyze, and they need to analyze. Good. When is this lesson rolling out?
They do, A Day does it on the 4th of December and B Day does it on the 5th of December.
Time. So homework for you is I want you to go back and make sure that the guided practice and the independent practice then are kind of just rewritten in a formal form or typed, I guess, instead of written, with everything that we have planned in here for me to review before you fully kind of roll this out.
Okay.
And then I want to come see it happen in class.
Cool. Well, thanks for the information.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It does make a difference.
Yeah, no
It does
problem.
Make a difference. Makes my brain open a little bit.
Looking for those